Okay, so here's a few still life photos taken by some students that I'm going to edit. What I do when I'm setting up my own things at home, I'll do I call this folder editing still life. And then I'll have unedited photos in there so I can still have the original photos that I took. And then I will throw the edited ones I've done in Photoshop into an edited folder. I think it's good practice to keep the originals intact, unedited. So I have the unedited photos open. The first thing I'm going to do, make a copy of the background here so I can see the before and after very easily and quickly. I don't want this line in here. I want that removed. I'm going to zoom in on that. The fast way to remove something from the background you don't want is to go over here. You see that there might be defaulted to the spot healing or healing brush, but there's a patch tool, red eye, all this stuff is in here. I really like the patch tool and the spot healing tool. So I'm going to go to the patch tool. You just click and drag your mouse around the spot. You drag it over, and then it removes that quickly, right? So this, in this case, is kind of doing some weird stuff around the edge here, but I can deal with that in a minute. So I'll do almost like a base coat, kind of get things roughed in here, and then I can zoom in a little bit tighter. And there's some spots on here I might remove, and this little edge I might want removed. So I use the patch to kind of base things out. Sometimes it goes perfectly. If not, I can go to the spot healing tool. I'm going to increase the brush size here by the bracket key beside the P key. I can just click and start clicking. Or I can click and drag that. And then you see how it kind of like gets rid of unwanted areas just between the patch and the spot healing brush. You can do tons of things with that and get rid of unwanted wrinkles, unwanted spots, and a ton of stuff, right? So I'm going to go back to the patch tool here, circle that area there, and you see because there's not a lot of contrast between light and dark, it did it perfectly. Probably circle both those things, boom, done, right? So patch tool and the spot healing tool are pretty amazing tools, right? So you can like take care of your background that way. Another thing to the background you might want to think about doing is I'm going to make a copy of this. Here's another trick. I can add a blur to this. So I could go up to Filter, Blur, go Gaussian Blur. Throw a little bit of a Gaussian blur on there until I like it. Then you can erase through or mask through. So I'm going to make a double copy of this. Turn this off. If you want the easy route, you just go to the eraser right here. Make sure you're on a soft brush. Make sure the opacity is closer to 100 than 10%. And then I can start erasing through the other area. So you can really soften out the background if you want. So those are some tricks. This is kind of faking a shallow depth of field. If you haven't achieved that in camera, you can just blur the background out, zoom in, and go to town, erasing the parts of your image you want in focus again, right? And then if you're happy with that, you could right-click, merge those layers down, and then you can see the results before and after. So there you go. And you can smudge things and blah-de-blah, but that's how you can get the background less distracting. What I might also do with this image is if there's too much upper area, you might just want to consider cropping it. So don't forget about a simple tool like crop and change the kind of vibe of your image. Even if you take a little bit off the edge there, could create an area of interest. Even if I went like that, right click, and then you can compare, and you can have different versions of your crop and whatnot. Going to the other image here, let's say I wanted to enhance the pink because I didn't get it quite the way that I wanted. Make a copy of this. I could do the same principle as before, go up to image. I'm going to erase through as the same principle as what I did before. I could go hue saturation. Don't forget about that. I can increase the saturation. See how it's increasing the pink just by doing that. You could also check out different hue options if you want more of a kind of purpley tint to the pink. You could do that, but I'm happy with it right there. Increase the saturation. Turn that off and on. Problem is it increases the saturation everywhere, not just on the pink part of the blanket. So you could go to your erase tool now, and you can erase through the areas that you don't want as saturated. I'm going to do that quickly. Again, if you're doing this professionally, like a more high end, I wouldn't recommend the erase tool. I'd recommend using masks, and I'll show you that in the next image. But for the no fuss, no muss way, you could just go in and you can start erasing through. And there you go. Now the pink's just highlighted on the sheet here. If you want to enhance the pink further, I would make a blank layer, and I would go to my soft light or overlay blending mode trick. So I'm going to put this on soft light, click on my foreground color, pick the pink that I want, go to my brush tool and start painting that in. And then that's another trick to kind of increase the pink if I want. And I can go around and actually start painting over top of the image with this soft light blending mode. You could also try overlay. Overlay is more electric. I call electric coloring. So I usually default to the soft light. It's a bit more subtle. And then you can adjust the opacity as you see fit. So just a couple image enhancements. If I'm done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a quick copy of the background. I'm going to flatten these and show you a quick thing that I would do as well. I right click on those. I selected all of them. Merge all those layers together. Make another copy of that. And don't forget about the dodge and burn. Those are really effective ways to create focal point. So if I go into the dodge tool, that lightens. Increase the size of that. Might drop the exposure to closer to 30. And then start clicking on my rows here. So if I'm all of a sudden want people more, the eye drawn more into the rows, I might dodge the rows up a bit or the edge of that teacup and create the focal point in the middle of the image. So you can see there, your eye isn't really going to the rows necessarily right away, but just by dodging that area quickly, your eye goes in there. And then I could kind of burn the edges of the image, and that would even enhance the focal point more. So go to burn, increase that burn exposure to about closer to 30, increase my brush size, start kind of like burning, darkening edges of the image here, and that will subtly kind of draw my eye and create this focal point around there. So there you go. So don't forget about dodge and burn, the soft light layer, cropping, and all those tricks. So I'm going to do the same thing with this image, except I'm going to do something a little bit more advanced called masking instead of erasing. So make a copy of that, right? I'm going to go down in here, and there's going to be a mask already thrown on my adjustment, because this is now throwing the adjustment into an adjustment layer. So rather than going up here and using the adjustments that lock themselves on the layer, I'm going to do something called non-destructive editing. Go down here and go to my adjustment layer, and I'm going to throw the hue saturation. And you see it kicks the hue saturation here on its own layer. And this is called a mask right here. So I'm going to increase the saturation like I did before. Turn the eyeball off and on. I don't want the flower or rose that bright. So basically, this is masking, not erasing. So this is a mask right here. I put my foreground on black. I go to my brush tool. I'm going to crank the opacity up to 100, and it's going to erase. So basically, essentially, my brush on black on the mask does the same thing as the eraser. It erases through. If I've done something I don't like I've gone too far here, you can see that the mask has created this black blob to say this is the part that is erased. If I want to undo that, I just reverse to the white. So the foreground's on white, and then that undoes the erase. So you can see that by over here, it has removed that black and has put the image back on there. Likewise, there you go. So you can actually start painting, pushing and pulling much more with masking than you can with erasing. So I could go back to the black. I could lower this opacity. I could start kind of opacitying it and kind of erasing it a little bit, and then go back to the white, remove areas. So I can start having much more adjustments and much more subtle, nuanced adjustments to the image by using masks instead of erase. So that's the tutorial in a nutshell. Image 1 went through how to deal with a background. You're removing that with the patch tool, the spot healing. There are other tools I'll cover tomorrow. And then just kind of enhancing the pink through soft light, adjustment layers, and erasing through. And now you know adjustment layers and masking.